The first thing that strikes you, stepping onto the cobblestones of Boulevard Haussmann in the autumn of 1890, is not the grandeur of the stone facades or the geometric precision of the avenues cutting through the city like surgical incisions through ancient flesh, but the smell. Paris in 1890 does not smell like pastries and perfume as modern imagination might suggest. It smells of horse manure mixed with coal smoke, of wet wool drying on bodies pressed together in omnibuses, of gaslight flickering in the early evening, releasing its faint petroleum tang into the air. The city is a living organism, breathing through 10,000 chimneys, exhaling industrial ambition and human desperation in equal measure. This is the Paris of the Belle Époque, a term that would only be coined decades later by nostalgic survivors of the First World War, looking back at this moment as a golden age. But for those living through it, 1890, Paris is not a postcard. It is a battlefield of modernity, where the old world and the new collide with such force that the sparks illuminate the entire continent. The streets themselves are a study in transformation. Haussmann's grand redesign, completed just 2 decades earlier, has torn through the medieval labyrinth that once made Paris a city of secrets and shadows. Now, the boulevards stretch wide and straight, designed not for charm, but for control. Wide enough that no barricade could block them. Straight enough that cannons could fire down their length without obstruction. The Second Empire may have fallen in 1870, but its architectural legacy remains, a stone testament to the state's fear of revolution and its desire for order. Yet even these grand avenues cannot fully suppress the chaos of human life. Side streets still twist and narrow, disappearing into neighborhoods where gaslight barely penetrates, where the buildings lean so close together that neighbors can pass objects from window to window without descending to the street. Here, in these forgotten corners, the Paris of Victor Hugo still breathes, a city of vertical slums and horizontal splendor, where a single street can contain both the palace and the gutter. The population has exploded. 2.5 million souls now inhabit this city, double what it held just 50 years before. They have come from the countryside, from Brittany and Normandy and the Loire Valley, driven by the mechanization of agriculture and the magnetic pull of industrial wages. They arrive at the railway stations, magnificent iron cathedrals like Gare du Nord and Gare de Lyon, structures that dwarf medieval churches and announce with architectural arrogance that the age of steam has arrived. But the city that greets them is not prepared for such numbers. Housing is a crisis managed by exploitation. The new apartment buildings that line the boulevards are stratified kingdoms of class. The first floor, the Piano Nobile, houses the wealthy, their ceilings high enough to accommodate chandeliers and their windows large enough to flood rooms with light. The second and third floors belong to the comfortable bourgeoisie, professionals and merchants who can afford space and servants. But climb higher and the ceilings compress, the rooms shrink, until at the 6th and 7th floors, you find the chambre de bonne, tiny servants' quarters tucked under the roof, sweltering in summer and freezing in winter, where a single room might house an entire family of recent arrivals from the provinces. The rhythm of the day is dictated by light and labor. The city wakes before dawn, not to birdsong but to the iron wheels of delivery carts on cobblestones, a sound like continuous thunder that echoes through the canyons of apartment buildings. The workers emerge first, the ones who stoke the furnaces and sweep the streets, who bake the bread and deliver the milk, who make the city function before the city even knows it is awake. By 7, the omnibuses are running, horse-drawn vehicles that follow fixed routes and charge fixed fares, democratizing movement in a way that would have been unimaginable a generation earlier. But democracy has its limits. The omnibuses are divided by class, with covered seats for those who can pay extra and open benches for those who cannot. The tram system, newly electrified in certain districts, promises a faster future, but the technology is still experimental, prone to breakdowns and sparks that terrify the horses sharing the streets. Electricity itself is the great mystery of the age, the invisible force that is beginning to reshape urban existence. The Eiffel Tower, completed just the year before for the 1889 Exposition Universelle, stands as a monument to this new power, its iron latticework rising 300 meters into the Parisian sky, taller than any structure humanity has ever built. At night, it is illuminated by thousands of gaslights, a beacon visible for kilometers. a promise that the 20th century will belong to those who master the invisible energies of nature. But beyond the spectacle, electricity is creeping into daily life. The first electric streetlights are appearing, their harsh white glow a stark contrast to the warm yellow of gaslight. Shop windows are beginning to experiment with electric illumination, transforming the streets into corridors of commerce that remain bright long after sunset. The department stores, these new cathedrals of consumption, like Le Bon Marché and Printemps, use electric light to create an atmosphere of perpetual day, where shoppers lose track of time and, more importantly, lose track of how much they are spending. The social geography of the city is as stratified as its architecture. The western districts, the 8th and 16th arrondissements, are the realm of the aristocracy and the haute bourgeoisie, where the streets are wider, the buildings cleaner, and the air noticeably clearer. Here women in silk gowns promenade along the Champs-Élysées, their waists compressed to impossible dimensions by whalebone corsets, their hair arranged in elaborate constructions that require hours of a lady's maid's labor. The men wear top hats and frock coats, carry walking sticks with silver handles, and affect an air of languid superiority that requires considerable effort to maintain. These are the people who attend the opera at the Palais Garnier, a building so ornate that it seems designed to induce vertigo, its grand staircase a stage where the audience performs for itself before the curtain even rises. But cross the river to the 19th or 20th arrondissements, and you enter a different world entirely. Here, the buildings are blackened with soot, the streets narrower and fouler, the air thick with the smell of tanning factories and slaughterhouses. These are the neighborhoods of the working poor, where families of 6 or 7 inhabit a single room, where tuberculosis is so common it is called the worker's disease, where children begin factory labor at ages that would shock modern sensibilities. Yet Paris in 1890 is not merely a city of exploitation and inequality. It is also a crucible of culture, a place where artistic movements are born and die in the span of a season. The Impressionists, once mocked and marginalized, are now achieving recognition, their paintings of modern life beginning to find buyers among the new industrial fortunes. But the avant-garde has already moved on. In Montmartre, in the cabarets and studios clustered around the Place Pigalle, a new generation of artists is experimenting with forms that will come to define the 20th century. The Moulin Rouge has just opened its doors, a temple of spectacle where the can-can is performed with such athletic vigor that it scandalized the bourgeoisie, even as they line up to watch. The poster artists, Toulouse-Lautrec chief among them, are transforming advertising into art, their lithographs plastered on walls across the city, announcing performances and products with imagery that is simultaneously commercial and revolutionary. The cafes are the city's intellectual bloodstream, the places where ideas circulate and combine in unexpected ways. At the Café de Flore or Les Deux Magots, you might find philosophers debating the nature of consciousness, poets reciting verses that will never be published, political radicals planning strikes or uprisings that will never come to fruition. Coffee and absinthe fuel these conversations, the latter a greenish liquid that is simultaneously fashionable and controversial, praised for its supposed creative properties and condemned for the madness it allegedly induces. The newspapers, dozens of them representing every possible political persuasion, are read aloud and argued over, their pages still damp from the presses. This is an age before radio or television, when print is the dominant medium and literacy the key to political participation. The Grandes boulevards have newspaper kiosks every few hundred meters, their vendors shouting headlines that blend news with sensation, truth with fabrication, in proportions that vary widely depending on the publication. The Seine remains the city's central artery, crossed by 32 bridges, each with its own character and history. The river is working infrastructure crowded with barges carrying coal and grain and timber, with laundry boats where women scrub clothes in water that is far from clean, with fishermen who somehow still find fish in waters that also receive the city's sewage. The embankments, recently completed, have transformed the riverbanks from muddy slopes into stone promenades, creating new public spaces where Parisians of all classes can walk and observe one another. But the river also serves a darker purpose. In times of flood, which still occur with regularity despite the engineering improvements, the Seine becomes an invader, rising into cellars and ground floors, disrupting the city's carefully maintained hierarchies by reminding everyone that nature retains the final authority. This is the Paris of 1890, a city balanced on the edge between centuries, between gaslight and electricity, between monarchy and republic, between the artisan workshop and the industrial factory. It is a city where Gustave Eiffel's Iron Tower stands as a promise of technological transcendence, while thousands still live in conditions that differ little from the medieval. It is a city of such concentrated creativity and such grinding poverty, of such architectural magnificence and such urban squalor, that it contains within itself all the contradictions of the modern age. To walk its streets in 1890 is to witness the birth of the 20th century, to see the future emerging from the ruins of the past, to understand that progress is never a straight line but always a negotiation between what was and what might be.